Hello, and welcome to Williams Mullen's Trending Now, an IP podcast, a legal podcast focused on providing innovative companies and investors with important and timely information concerning intangible assets such as patents, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. I'm your host, Janet Cho, and today I'll be joined by my colleague, Elizabeth Davenport, a paralegal in our intellectual property practice group here at Williams Mullen, to discuss Paralegal Insights, a collaborative trademark practice. Elizabeth, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you, Janet.
What we're going to discuss today is very timely and very important. Many trademark applicants and registrants may have firsthand experience with what we're about to talk about, but it relates to fraudulent communications, solicitations, and notifications that are supposedly coming from the United States Patent and Trademark Office, whether it's from the office itself or from examining attorneys. And I think over time, these solicitations, as we'll call them, have become, one, greater in volume, two, more varied in their delivery, and three, more sophisticated in how they ultimately reach applicants and registrants. So it's our hope today to let you know about some of these fraudulent solicitations, what you can expect to see, and what you can do in the event you receive some of these communications. So without further ado, Elizabeth, I'll turn it over to you and we can get into the heart of the matter.
Okay. So trademark owners are receiving unsolicited notices from these deceiving individuals and or fake companies. These individuals or fake companies obtain the trademark owner and application details from the public records that are available at the USPTO website database. When you file a U.S. application with the USPTO, the applicant's name and address are available to the public, along with the application details such as the mark, the application serial number, the filing date, list of goods or services. These individuals or fake companies send official-looking communications to trademark owners requesting payments, offering legal services, offering trademark monitoring services, recording trademarks with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, offering to register in private registries, and offering renewal services. These official-looking communications contain the trademark owner's application and registration details. Be careful, as some of these companies call themselves by names that appear to be official government agencies. They are also using individuals who impersonate the USPTO, including using spoofed telephone numbers. The USPTO will never send you an invoice or call you to request a payment. If you have hired an attorney to handle your application, all legitimate official correspondence from the USPTO about your application will be sent directly to your attorney. Legitimate official communications from the USPTO will list the United States Patent and Trademark Office from Alexandria, Virginia, or will be from uspto.gov.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So you can see that the breadth and scope of information collected by the USPTO is pretty detailed. And so the USPTO should already have the information they need from you as an applicant or a registrant for you to conduct business. But all of this said, you as an individual or as a company may still receive some sort of fraudulent solicitation directly from these parties out there who are perhaps looking for your business or maybe something more nefarious. But one thing to look out for is definitely hard copy mailings that look like invoices. Sometimes you may receive faxes of these for those of us or those of you in the listening universe that still receive faxes. So some sort of written communication that resembles an invoice. You may also receive, and I wanted to delve into this a little bit, spoofed phone calls. Very often, legitimately, examining attorneys may contact applicants or registrants or their attorneys with questions or issues or directives. And very often you can tell that the call is coming officially from the USPTO because there will be an examining attorney's name, or the number will have a 571 area code, which is the area code typically tied with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. But there are parties out there who are, and what I mean by spoof is managing to replicate either these area codes, or for caller identification purposes, can make the call look like it's coming from the USPTO or from an individual examiner. So they're spoofing or replicating official call data. So you may actually pick up a call when you see that there's a 571 number coming through, or there's a number of an examining attorney perhaps that you've worked with in the past, and you think it's a legitimate call and the examining attorney wants something from you. The other thing that is the other issue that's come up is there have been some changes to the attorney of record for those who are represented by attorneys, meaning that there appear to have been unauthorized changes of representation or powers of attorney filed with certain records. And why that is important or critical is that all official communications from the USPTO, if you're represented by an attorney, will go to your attorney. And I think this likely affects those of our listeners who maybe have a very advanced portfolio, meaning your registrations need to be renewed during the 5-year period, or maybe even once every 10 years. So you're not expecting a lot of contact from the USPTO, but when your attorney has been changed and you're not aware of it, official communications would be going to that new attorney, and you might not even know that that has occurred. And the attorney may be at the renewal mark, that new attorney or that unauthorized attorney may be reaching out to you. And if in that intervening time between renewals, the person managing your trademark portfolio, whoever that may be, has changed, or they're not really familiar with who your trademark attorney should be, they won't necessarily know, oh, this is a different firm. Why is this a different firm? Or weren't we previously represented by ABC law firm? Why is it now a new firm? So I say all that to say that that has occurred as well. So one thing to think about is having a designated person if possible, perhaps once a year, just checking the USPTO's public records just to make sure everything looks legitimate or looks accurate. It's not intended to be an audit or anything fulsome in that regard, but just having someone do a double check behind the record to make sure that everything is as it should be. And if it needs to be changed, that it is changed, and you can catch anything that's been unauthorized. But there are a fair number of, particularly these notices that are going out. The other thing you might want to do is, if your company is such that there is an accounting department or a billing department that pays invoices as they come in, you might want to just let them know about this as well, or have them make sure that any communication that comes in that seems like it's from the United States Patent and Trademark Office is cleared with the proper person within the company who may be managing IP or trademarks. There have been instances where fraudulent invoices have been paid because the accounting department was not made aware that these fraudulent solicitations for payment were being sent out, and so invoices got paid. So you just want to, perhaps as a registrant or applicant, make sure that you let all of the relevant parties who may be involved in payment be aware of what's happening. If you do receive a notice, there are certain things that you can do to, confirm or to think about next steps. So Elizabeth, if you do receive a notice, what would you say is the best advice?
You should read the notice carefully, and if you have any concerns, feel free to contact your IP attorney or call the USPTO directly. Usually these notices can just be discarded. The USPTO has a section on their website dedicated to addressing these unsolicited communications. If you receive a solicitation, you can also let the USPTO know about it by sending information via email to tmsolicitations@uspto.gov.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I will add that the USPTO keeps a running list of companies that are issuing fraudulent solicitations or fraudulent invoices. You can actually access that at the USPTO's website. If you go to their website generally and enter into the search function, fraudulent notices, associated words, I think a lot of people like to use the word scams, but it's listed as a fraudulent notification list. And you can see all of the companies that the USPTO at least has been made aware of that are issuing these types of fraudulent notifications and invoices. And you can also, through that email that Elizabeth just mentioned, ask the USPTO to add a company to that list. So if you have received a solicitation from a company that is not on the list, the USPTO would be willing to put that on there for the public good. And it's pretty serious, the activities that are being propagated by some of these companies. Some of them will handle your deadline or handle your action for a very elevated fee. Others will actually take your fees and not do anything. And I will just mention recently that a federal court in South Carolina sentenced an individual to prison time and restitution in terms of mail fraud for operating what was deemed a fraudulent business relating to this kind of conduct. So I think the USPTO and the legal system is definitely aware of this, and it's becoming more serious. We also want you all to know on your end what you can do, because it is not just potentially the implication of fees, but if things are not handled correctly with your application or your registration, you could lose your rights and your application or registration. So there's a fair amount at risk. So with that, Elizabeth, I think it might be helpful to let our listeners know what we see as some emerging trends with some of these solicitations and what to look out for.
Some of them are becoming more sophisticated. Generally, as I think you mentioned, they pretend to be an official agency, and usually they present a deadline, an urgent problem, and they pressure you for money. With the growth of artificial intelligence, as you mentioned before, they are deceiving trademark owners by sending fake cloned voices for telephone calls.
So I think, Elizabeth, your comments show that these fraudulent solicitations are becoming much more sophisticated, and it's hard to stay ahead of some of the developments. If you can, that's great, but I think it's good to think about all of the different ways that you might be contacted fraudulently, given that your trademark information is a matter of public record. But with all of that, given that we can't always anticipate what the fraudulent solicitation companies are going to do next, I would say that the best thing to do in a circumstance like this is to have a fair bit of skepticism. So if you're contacted by the USPTO or you receive a notice, I would say, read it carefully, make sure that it's accurate. If you have an attorney, make sure you contact your attorney and pass either the written communication or the voicemail to them so that your attorney can vet this properly. If you are not certain that this is actually legitimate and you don't have an attorney that you can reference, depending on if it's related to an application or a registration, you can certainly call the USPTO or the examining attorney associated with your record and just confirm with them, do I have an issue here? Is this true? I think that it's always good not to either pay or concede or agree to take action unless you're 100% comfortable with doing that, or you've received some confirmation through your attorney or a trusted source that what is being asked of you is in fact true. And one thing I will mention with some of these fraudulent solicitations is that they will very often send you a notice that says there's an action due on your application or there's an action due on your registration, and the relevant time period to do that has not actually opened. So the notice itself may seem extremely urgent and compelling, but under the relevant rules, it may not actually even be possible to take that action. And so you have to think about what it is you might be paying for. So if you have any questions, again, check with your attorney, or you can always check with the USPTO or the examining attorney if you are a correspondent for your application or registration. There's a wealth of information there. So Elizabeth, I think it might be helpful to just as a parting note, let our listeners know what are some important or key points to note to deal with or avoid some of these solicitations.
So again, like you've mentioned before, always be skeptical. Don't send money via a gift card or a wire to someone that you don't know at the agency. Always check with your attorney or call the USPTO. With regard to any emails, avoid clicking on links or opening unsolicited emails or attachments. Be careful for secure online businesses. They usually have in the URL HTTPS and a lock icon. So that usually indicates that the website is legitimate. And don't share personal information. So, those are just some suggestions to avoid these type of frauds.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I think your comments show that this is an ever evolving subject. And so for our listeners, just be careful, and it's okay to stop and think twice about a deadline, even though a notice you may receive sounds like it's very urgent. So with that, that will wrap up our discussion on a collaborative trademark practice. I'd like to thank Elizabeth for joining me on Trending Now, an IP podcast. If you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes, please contact us. You can also visit our intellectual property practice page at williamsmullen.com/IP. There you can find out more about our team, as well as past episodes of this podcast and legal alerts. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when our next episode posts. Thanks for listening. Until next time.